Lieutenant Sam Rivers adjusted his worn tactical vest one more time, feeling the weight of his grandfather's throwing knives secured in their leather sheaths along his belt. Each blade was simple carbon steel, forged in the old ways on Earth. Without a single piece of advanced technology to their name around him, the elite strike team prepared their weapons with the confidence that only came from possessing the galaxy's most advanced military hardware. Commander Vash, the towering Draknari warrior, ran his clawed fingers along his plasma cannon's energy core, watching the blue glow pulse with deadly promise. His reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile as he glanced at the human's primitive gear. "Tell me again why we brought the cave dweller?" Vash's voice carried the distinctive hiss of his species, loud enough for everyone in the shuttle bay to hear. The other aliens turned their attention to Sam, their various appendages and sensory organs focusing on the lone human, among them Sergeant Krell, a massive Vorthak whose insectoid frame towered over even the Draknari, clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his kind. "Look at his weapons," Krell's translator rendered his chittering into standard galactic speech. "Metal blades and chemical propellant firearms. Does he think we are raiding a museum?" Sam continued his equipment check, running through the same ritual his father had taught him, and his father before him. Each knife balanced perfectly in his palm, each one tested for weight distribution and edge sharpness. The other soldiers might not understand, but these blades had seen 3 generations of Rivers family military service, from the urban conflicts of old Earth to the colonial wars on the Outer Rim. The shuttle bay's massive doors began their slow opening sequence, revealing the target planet Kepler-7 hanging in space like a brown and orange marble. Intelligence. Reports indicated the rebel stronghold was built into the planet's largest mountain range, using natural cave systems and advanced shielding technology to create a nearly impregnable fortress. Mission briefing in 5 minutes, announced Captain Zora, the mission's Altarian commander. Her blue-skinned features remained impassive as she studied the tactical displays, but Sam caught the slight narrowing of her silver eyes when they fell on him. Even she seemed to question the wisdom of including a human in this operation. As the team gathered around the holographic display, Sam found himself pushed to the back of the group. The towering aliens blocked most of his view, but he had already memorized every detail of the mission parameters. The rebel fortress contained a weapons cache that could tip the balance of power in 3 different star systems. Their job was to infiltrate, secure the cache, and extract before rebel reinforcements could arrive. "The fortress is protected by military-grade energy shields," Captain Zora explained, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had led dozens of similar operations. "Their defensive positions are built into the mountain itself, giving them superior firepower and cover. We will have approximately 47 minutes before their fleet units return from patrol." Commander Vash hefted his plasma cannon with obvious satisfaction. "Their shields will not stand against Draknari firepower," he boasted, the weapon's energy cell humming with contained destruction. "We will burn through their defenses like paper." Sergeant Krell activated his personal energy shield, the translucent barrier flickering to life around his armored form. "Vorthak defensive technology has never failed in battle," he declared. "Their primitive weapons cannot penetrate our shields." Other team members began displaying their own advanced equipment. Lieutenant Nix, a slender Etherian, demonstrated her phase rifle's ability to fire through solid matter. Corporal Bane, whose cybernetic enhancements covered half his Nixarian body, showed off targeting systems that could track multiple enemies simultaneously. Sam listened to the alien soldiers boasting, while running his thumb along the edge of his favorite throwing knife. The blade had been forged by his great-grandfather during the Martian Independence Wars, its carbon steel edge honed to molecular sharpness through techniques that predated spaceflight. No energy signature, no electronic components, no power source that could fail at a critical moment. "What about you, human?" Commander Vash's question dripped with barely concealed contempt. "What miracle of primitive technology will you contribute to our mission?" The other aliens turned their attention back to Sam, their advanced sensory equipment probably analyzing everything from his heart rate to his chemical emissions. Some looked curious, others amused, but most showed the kind of polite indifference reserved for outdated equipment that somehow ended up in a modern arsenal. "I will do my job," Sam replied simply, securing his ballistic rifle and checking his knife sheaths one final time. The weapon was older than some of the aliens on the team, firing metal projectiles through controlled chemical explosions. By galactic standards, it was barely more advanced than a crossbow. Sergeant Krell's mandibles clicked in what his species considered laughter. "Listen to the confidence," he announced to the group. "Perhaps he plans to throw rocks at their gunships." The joke spread through the team like wildfire, each species adding their own cultural spin to the humor. The Etherians made musical sounds that indicated amusement, while the Nexarians' cybernetic implants flashed in synchronized patterns. Even Captain Zora allowed herself a small smile. At the humans' expense, Sam had heard it all before. Every joint operation, every mixed unit assignment, every time humans served alongside the galaxy's more technologically advanced species. The comments about primitive weapons, outdated tactics, and stubborn adherence to obsolete methods had followed human soldiers. Across 100 different worlds, 60 seconds to drop zone, the shuttle pilot announced, his voice cutting through the alien chatter. The massive transport began its descent through Kepler-7's atmosphere, its hull shuddering slightly as it encountered the planet's turbulent upper winds. The aliens began their final equipment checks with practiced efficiency, their advanced gear responding to mental commands and biometric inputs, energy weapons powered up with distinctive whines, shields activated with barely audible hums, and targeting systems began their acquisition sweeps. Sam performed his own final check with methods that had not changed in centuries: visual inspection of each blade's edge, physical testing of every sheath's retention system, manual verification of his rifle's action and ammunition count. His movements were deliberate and methodical, learned through repetition rather than downloaded from a training program. 30 seconds, the pilot called out. "Prepare for combat drop." The shuttle's bay doors opened with a mechanical roar, revealing the hostile landscape below. Rocky terrain stretched in all directions, broken by deep crevasses and towering stone formations that could hide an army. In the distance, the rebel fortress squatted against the mountainside like a metallic tumor, its defensive positions already tracking their approach. "Remember," Captain Zora shouted over the wind noise, "we are the best the Galactic Defense Force has to offer. Their primitive rebels cannot stand against our superior technology and training." Commander Vash chambered a plasma round with unnecessary force, the weapon's energy core blazing brighter. "Today we show these rebels the price of defying civilized society," he declared. "Let them see what real warriors can accomplish." The alien soldiers began their drop sequence, anti-gravity units and powered armor carrying them toward the battlefield with inhuman grace. Their advanced equipment made them look like gods of war descending from the heavens. Bristling with enough firepower to level small cities, Sam checked his parachute straps and prepared to jump the old-fashioned way, using nothing more than fabric and physics to reach the ground safely. As he stood at the shuttle's edge, wind whipping through his hair, he touched the handle of his great-grandfather's knife one more time. Below them, energy weapons began firing from the rebel positions, painting the sky with deadly light. The real battle was about to begin, and every alien on the team was confident that their superior technology would carry the day. None of them noticed Sam's slight smile as he stepped into empty air, falling toward a fight where the oldest weapons might prove to be the deadliest. The first energy blast seared past Commander Vash's head, leaving the distinct ozone smell that accompanied near misses from plasma weapons. He rolled behind a jagged boulder and returned fire with his cannon, the blue bolt striking the rebel, shield generators and dissipating harmlessly into crackling light. Their defensive positions are stronger than intelligence indicated. Captain Zora's voice crackled through the comm system as she took cover behind a metallic outcropping. Her phase rifle whined as it charged for another shot, but the rebels' energy barriers were deflecting everything the strike team could throw at them. Sergeant Krell scuttled between rock formations on his 6 insectoid legs, his personal shield flaring as enemy fire found his position. "Vorthak's shields holding at 93% efficiency," he reported, though his mandibles clicked with obvious concern. "But their weapons are more advanced than expected." The rebel fortress had transformed the entire mountainside into a killing field. Energy turrets emerged from concealed positions to fire devastating volleys before disappearing back into their armored housings. Shield generators created overlapping fields of protection that turned the mountain face into an impenetrable wall of crackling energy. Lieutenant Nix tried to use her rifle's matter penetration capabilities, but the rebel shields extended deep into the rock itself. "I cannot find a clear shot," she reported, her ethereal voice carrying frustration that was rare for her species. "Their shielding technology is far more sophisticated than our intelligence," suggested Sam, crouched behind a cluster of fallen boulders, about 200 meters from the main alien assault force, using an old pair of mechanical binoculars to study the enemy positions. While his teammates' advanced sensors were being jammed or confused by the rebels' electronic countermeasures, his simple optical device showed him exactly what he needed to see. The rebels had built their fortress using a combination of natural cave systems and advanced technology. Energy barriers covered every possible approach, while automated weapons systems tracked movement with deadly precision. But Sam's grandfather had taught him to look for patterns, and patterns were exactly what he was seeing, every 37 seconds. The energy shields flickered for exactly 2.3 seconds while their generators cycled through a reset sequence. The timing was precise, probably controlled by a master computer system that prioritized efficiency over unpredictability. It was a weakness, but only for someone watching with simple eyes instead of complex sensors. "Their shields are regenerating faster than we can damage them," Corporal Bain reported, his cybernetic targeting system struggling to find viable attack vectors. "My analysis indicates a 78% probability of mission failure if current conditions persist." Commander Vash's plasma cannon overheated from continuous firing, forcing him to wait for the cooling cycle to complete. "Draknari weapons are the finest in the galaxy," he snarled into his communicator. "These rebels must have stolen military-grade equipment from multiple civilizations." The alien strike team had expected to overwhelm primitive rebels with superior firepower and advanced tactics. Instead, they found themselves pinned down by defensive systems that matched or exceeded their own technological capabilities. Energy bolts filled the air like deadly rain, forcing even the most heavily armored team members to remain in cover. "We need orbital support," Captain Zora decided after reviewing the tactical situation. "The fortress is too well defended for a ground assault with current resources. Orbital support is unavailable for 4 hours and 17 minutes. The shuttle pilot's voice crackled. "Through atmospheric interference, Fleet Command is engaged with rebel forces in the outer system." Sergeant Krell's shield finally failed under concentrated fire, forcing him to retreat to a deeper position behind the rock formations. "Vorthak defensive systems at 12% efficiency," he reported, his translator struggling to render the panic in his chittering voice. "Require immediate tactical withdrawal." The rebels seemed to sense their advantage and began pressing forward from their mountain positions. Squads of fighters emerged from hidden tunnels, their own energy weapons adding to the devastating crossfire. The strike team's superior technology was being matched by superior positioning and preparation. Sam continued his careful observation of the enemy patterns, timing each shield cycle with the precision his father had drilled into him during countless hours of target practice. The rebels were using standard galactic military equipment, which meant standard galactic military protocols that had been developed by species who thought in terms of energy efficiency and automated systems. "Human." Commander Vash's voice carried a note of desperation that his pride would normally never allow. "Can your primitive weapons penetrate their
shields?"
"No," Sam replied honestly. His ballistic rifle might punch through personal armor, but military-grade energy barriers would stop his bullets as easily as they stopped plasma bolts. However, he had noticed something else that the advanced alien sensors had missed. The shield generators were powered by fusion reactors buried deep in the mountain, but their control systems were housed in vulnerable surface installations. More importantly, those control systems were connected by physical cables rather than wireless links. The rebels had learned from previous encounters with electronic warfare specialists. "I need to get closer," Sam announced, checking his knife harnesses one more time. Each blade was secured but easily accessible, balanced for throwing at distances from 5 to 50 meters. Cover me for 60 seconds. Closer? Lieutenant Nix's musical voice rose in pitch with what her species considered extreme surprise. The human wishes to advance into concentrated fire with primitive weapons? Negative. Captain Zora's command authority cut through the comm chatter. All units maintain defensive positions. We cannot afford to lose personnel in futile assault attempts. Sam was already moving before the captain finished speaking, using natural terrain features to mask his movement from the rebels' automated tracking systems. His low-tech approach kept him invisible to sensors calibrated for energy signatures and electronic emissions. Simple cloth. Leather and steel generated no readings that would trigger their sophisticated detection networks. The aliens watched in amazement as the human soldier disappeared into the landscape like smoke. One moment he was crouched behind the boulder cluster. The next he was gone without a trace. Their advanced optics and sensor arrays could detect a mouse at 500 meters, but somehow lost track of a full-grown human at 50. Where did he go? Corporal Bain's cybernetic enhancements scanned the battlefield frantically. My tracking systems show no movement in that sector. Commander Vash's reptilian eyes narrowed as he studied the terrain where Sam had vanished. Perhaps the primitive human has finally realized his limitations and retreated. Negative. Captain Zora's voice carried a note of professional respect that surprised her team. Monitor for his position. Something tells me we have not seen the last of him. The rebels continued their advance, their energy weapons creating a curtain of deadly light that forced the alien strike team deeper into defensive positions. Victory seemed inevitable as their superior numbers and positioning pressed the advantage. None of them noticed the human soldier working his way through the rocks toward their flank. Sam moved with patience learned from generations of hunters and soldiers who had survived by understanding that speed was less important than timing. Each step was calculated to avoid loose stones that might create noise. Each pause was timed to coincide with weapons fire that would mask any sound he might make. The alien technology that had failed his teammates now worked in his favor. The rebels' sensors were designed to detect advanced weapons and equipment, not simple human movement through natural terrain. Their targeting computers looked for energy signatures, electronic emissions, and metallic components. They were not programmed to notice a man with steel knives and cloth clothing. As Sam reached his chosen position, he could see the shield generator's control housing clearly. It was protected by the energy barrier, but the barrier followed a predictable cycle. 37 seconds of full power, followed by 2.3 seconds of vulnerability while the system reset. He drew his grandfather's knife and began counting down the seconds, calculating trajectory and timing with the mathematical precision that came from years of practice. The blade would have to travel exactly 43 meters through a gap that would exist for less than 3 seconds. Around him, the battle raged. With the fury of advanced civilizations at war, energy weapons painted the sky with deadly colors while shield generators hummed with barely contained power. But none of that technology could match the simple precision of a human soldier who understood that sometimes the oldest solutions were the best ones. The rebel patrol walked past Sam's hiding position just 3 meters away, their heavy boots crunching on loose gravel, while their advanced sensors swept the area for any sign of the alien strike team. Their equipment registered nothing more threatening than indigenous rock formations and scattered mineral deposits. Sam pressed himself deeper into the narrow crevice he had found, controlling his breathing with techniques passed down from his grandfather's generation of special operations soldiers. The rebels' scanning equipment was sophisticated enough to detect heartbeats and body heat signatures, but it was calibrated for the larger physiological patterns of most galactic species. Sector 7 clear, the rebel leader reported through his communication device, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who trusted his technology completely. No signs of enemy infiltration in this zone. The patrol moved on toward their next checkpoint, leaving Sam alone with a perfect view of the shield generator complex. From his elevated position, he could see the intricate network of power conduits and control systems that kept the mountain fortress impregnable. More importantly, he could see the pattern that had escaped everyone else's attention. The shield generators were not independent systems. They were linked through a cascade network that allowed them to share power and coordinate their defensive coverage. If one generator failed, the others would automatically compensate by expanding their coverage areas. But that compensation took time, and during that brief interval, gaps would appear in the defensive matrix. Sam studied the timing carefully, using an old mechanical stopwatch that his father had carried through the colonial wars. Electronic timers might be detected by enemy sensors, but the simple spring-driven mechanism generated no emissions that could betray his position. 37 seconds of full coverage, 2.3 seconds of reset vulnerability, then a 4-second stabilization period where the network rebalanced itself. The primary generator was housed in a reinforced bunker built into the mountainside, but its external cooling system required constant airflow to prevent overheating. That airflow came through armored vents that opened and closed on a mechanical schedule. More importantly, those vents provided direct access to the generator's primary power coupling. Drawing his grandfather's knife, Sam began calculating the trajectory he would need. The target was 43.7 meters away, elevated 21 meters above his position, and protected by an energy barrier that would exist in approximately 18 seconds. The throw would have to account for gravitational drop, wind resistance, and the precise timing needed to slip through the barrier during its reset cycle behind him. The battle continued with increasing desperation. Commander Vash's plasma cannon had overheated twice, forcing him to rely on backup weapons that were less effective against the rebel shields. Sergeant Krell's personal barriers had failed completely, leaving him dependent on natural cover that was becoming increasingly inadequate as rebel forces pressed their advantage status report. Captain Zora's voice crackled through the communication system, carrying the strain of a commander watching her mission dissolve into failure. All units provide current tactical assessment. Draknari weapons, at 60% efficiency. Commander Vash reported, his reptilian pride evident even through the electronic distortion. Enemy shields remain at full strength despite concentrated fire. Vorthak defensive systems offline, Sergeant Krell admitted, his mandibles clicking, with what his species considered embarrassment, requiring immediate tactical withdrawal to maintain combat effectiveness. Lieutenant Nix's ethereal voice carried unusual tension as she reported her own situation. Phase rifle unable to penetrate enemy barriers. Their shielding extends below ground level beyond my weapons range, Corporal Bane's cybernetic systems. We're struggling with electronic jamming from the rebel fortress. Targeting computers operating at 37% efficiency, he announced, cannot establish reliable firing solutions through their countermeasures. Sam ignored the reports from his teammates, focusing entirely on the mechanical rhythm of the shield generator's cooling system. In 12 seconds, the vents would open for their scheduled airflow cycle. In 15 seconds, the energy barrier would begin its reset sequence. In 17 seconds, he would have a window of opportunity that would last exactly 2.3 seconds. The knife felt perfect in his hand, its weight and balance as familiar as his own heartbeat. The carbon steel blade had been forged by his great-grandfather using techniques that predated space travel, shaped by a craftsman who understood that the best weapons were extensions of their wielder's will rather than independent technological marvels. Where is the human? Commander Vash's question carried both irritation and something that might have been concern. Has he abandoned the mission? Captain Zora's tactical display showed no trace of Sam's position, despite sensors capable of tracking individual soldiers across entire continents. Unknown, she admitted. He disappeared from our instruments 17 minutes ago, probably. Hiding in some cave, Sergeant Krell's translator rendered his chittering into words dripping with contempt. Primitive humans lack the courage for real warfare. The countdown in Sam's head reached 0, and he rose from cover with the fluid motion that 3 generations of soldiers had perfected through constant practice. His arm drew back in the classical throwing stance while his eyes fixed on the target with the intensity of a predator selecting prey. Every muscle in his body coordinated for the single moment when timing, trajectory, and opportunity would align. The knife left his hand with a whisper of displaced air, spinning through its arc with the precision that only came from thousands of hours of practice. The blade caught the alien sun's light as it flew, reflecting brief flashes that looked like falling stars to anyone watching from below. Gravity pulled at its mass while atmospheric resistance tried to slow its flight. But the throw had been calculated to account for both forces. 2.1 seconds into the shield generator's reset cycle, the knife slipped through the energy barrier like it was made of mist. The blade struck the exposed power, coupling with surgical precision, severing the connection between the primary generator and the network's central control system. Sparks erupted from the damaged coupling as electricity sought new pathways through suddenly inadequate conduits. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the rebel defenses. The primary generator's failure triggered emergency protocols throughout the shield network, causing each remaining generator to expand its coverage area while simultaneously reducing power to compensate for the lost unit. But the network had been designed for gradual load sharing, not sudden system failures. One by one, the remaining generators began overloading as they tried to maintain coverage across areas that had been designed for distributed defense. Their cooling systems, already operating at maximum capacity, could not handle the increased power demands. Warning lights began flashing throughout the rebel fortress as engineers realized their supposedly impregnable defensive network was cascading into total failure, primary shields failing. The rebel commander's voice carried disbelief as he watched his tactical displays show spreading red zones across the mountain face. All generators showing critical overload, engineering teams to emergency stations immediately, but it was, too late. The cascade failure had passed the point where human intervention could restore the network's stability. Generator after generator shut down automatically to prevent catastrophic explosion, leaving gaps in the defensive coverage that grew larger with each passing second. From their positions below, the alien strike team watched in amazement as the energy barriers that had seemed impenetrable began flickering and dying. Commander. Vash's reptilian eyes widened as he realized the implications. For the first time since the battle began, they had targets they could actually hit. All units advance. Captain Zora's command carried new authority as she saw opportunity replacing certain defeat. Concentrate fire on exposed positions while their shields are down. The aliens burst from cover with renewed confidence, their advanced weapons finally able to engage rebel positions that had been invulnerable just moments before. Plasma bolts and phase rifle beams found their targets with devastating effect, forcing the rebels to abandon positions they had considered absolutely secure. Sam retrieved a second knife from his harness and began moving toward his next target. The rebels had backup generators, but those systems would take time to come online, time that his teammates could use to press their advantage and complete the mission. In the rebel command center, alarms were screaming as engineers tried to understand how their perfect defensive network had failed so completely. Their sensor logs showed no weapons fire, no electromagnetic pulse, no indication of any attack that should have been capable of penetrating their shield, sir. A technician's voice carried confusion as he studied the damage reports. The primary coupling was severed by what appears to be a metal blade. Primitive steel construction, no energy signature, no electronic components. The rebel commander stared at his subordinate with disbelief. In an age of plasma weapons and energy shields, the idea that a simple knife could defeat their most advanced defensive system seemed impossible. But the evidence was undeniable, and his fortress was now vulnerable to assault by enemies he had been confident were already defeated. Down in the rocks, Sam was already calculating his next throw. The ground shook beneath the alien strike team's feet as something massive began, rising from behind the rebel fortress. Metal groaned and hydraulic systems hissed as a shape emerged from concealed launch bays carved deep into the mountainside. What appeared was a nightmare of military engineering that made every advanced weapon in the strike team's arsenal look like toys. Hammerhead-class assault gunship, Captain Zora identified through gritted teeth, her tactical display showing threat assessments that made her blood run cold. Military-grade armor, particle beam weapons, and shield systems rated for fleet engagement. The massive vessel rose into the sky with the deadly grace of a predator that had just spotted prey. Its hull stretched nearly 200 meters from nose to tail, bristling with weapon systems that could reduce entire cities to radioactive glass. Emergency lights flashed along its armored surface, as targeting systems locked onto the alien soldiers below Commander Vash's plasma cannon suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate as he watched the gunship's main particle beam begin charging with a sound like rolling thunder. Draknari weapons cannot penetrate military starship armor, he admitted, his reptilian pride cracking under the weight of tactical reality. Sergeant Krell's insectoid form trembled as his enhanced vision calculated the firepower arrayed against them. Fourth-act defensive systems would be insufficient against weapons of this magnitude, he reported, his mandibles clicking with barely controlled panic. Recommend immediate tactical withdrawal. The gunship's pilot seemed to be taking his time, probably enjoying the psychological effect of letting his target see exactly how outmatched they were. The vessel's targeting arrays swept across the battlefield with mechanical precision, cataloging every alien soldier and calculating optimal firing solutions. Fleet support is still 3 hours away. The shuttle pilot's voice crackled with static interference. Unable to provide air cover against military-grade opposition, Lieutenant Nix tried targeting the gunship with her phase rifle, but the energy bolt dissipated harmlessly against military shielding that could stop battleship weapons. Phase technology ineffective, she reported, her ethereal voice carrying defeat. Their defensive systems exceed our offensive capabilities by several orders of magnitude. Corporal Bain's cybernetic targeting computers ran probability calculations that painted an increasingly grim picture. Analysis indicates 0% probability of mission success against current opposition, he announced. Recommend immediate evacuation if transport assets remain viable. The rebels on the ground seemed to draw new confidence from their gunship's arrival, emerging from cover to press their advantage while the aliens were distracted by the aerial threat. Energy weapons fire increased dramatically as rebel forces realized their enemies were trapped between ground forces and devastating air support. From his concealed position high in the rocky terrain, Sam watched the massive warship through his simple mechanical binoculars. While his teammates' sophisticated sensors were being jammed by the gunship's electronic countermeasures, his purely optical device showed him every detail of the vessel's construction. The ship was indeed a fortress in the sky, armed and armored beyond anything the strike team could hope to defeat with conventional weapons. But Sam's grandfather had taught him that every machine, no matter how sophisticated, had weaknesses that came from the same engineering principles that made it strong. The gunship's armor was thickest along its main hull and weapon mounts. Designed to deflect or absorb direct fire from enemy warships, its shields could stop energy weapons that would vaporize mountains. But all that protection and firepower created enormous heat, and heat had to go somewhere along the vessel's underside. Sam could see the distinctive rectangular outlines of cooling vents. They were small, heavily armored, and normally covered by retractable plates that opened only when internal temperatures exceeded safe operating parameters. The ship had been running its weapons and shields at full power for several minutes now, which meant those vents would be opening soon. More importantly, Sam could see something that the gunship's designers had never expected anyone to notice. One of the cooling vents, located just forward of the main reactor housing, had a direct line to the ship's power distribution center. It was protected by multiple layers of armored plating and energy barriers, but during cooling cycles, there was a narrow channel that led straight to the heart of the vessel's power systems. The mathematical challenge was staggering. The gunship was moving at approximately 40 meters per second in a slowly expanding spiral pattern designed to keep ground targets within weapons range while avoiding potential threats. The cooling vent he needed was less than 30 centimeters square, located on the underside of a moving target nearly a kilometer away. Wind conditions at altitude were different from ground level, with cross-currents and thermal updrafts that would affect projectile trajectory in complex ways. The timing would have to be perfect, accounting for the ship's movement, the vent's opening cycle, and the flight time of a thrown blade through varying atmospheric conditions. Sam drew his great-grandfather's knife, the carbon steel blade that had served 3 generations of soldiers in conflicts across a dozen worlds. The weapon had no targeting computer, no guidance system, no advanced materials that could adjust their flight path, just perfectly balanced steel shaped by a craftsman who understood that the best weapons were extensions of human will and skill. Target acquired. The gunship pilot's voice boomed across the battlefield through external speakers. Commencing ground assault in 30 seconds. Surrender now or face complete annihilation. The alien strike team looked up at their approaching doom with the helpless desperation of warriors who had suddenly discovered that their advanced technology meant nothing against superior firepower. Their energy weapons and defensive systems, the pride of galactic civilization, were useless against a target this heavily armed and armored. All units prepare for evasive maneuvers, Captain Zora ordered, though her tactical training told her that evasion was impossible against weapons designed to track and destroy fast-moving starfighters. Disperse and seek maximum cover. Commander Vash fired his plasma cannon at the gunship in a gesture of defiant futility. The energy bolt struck the vessel's shields and disappeared without leaving so much as a scorch mark on the armored hull. Draknari, do not surrender, he snarled, chambering another round that would be equally ineffective. The gunship's main particle beam reached full charge, its targeting system locked onto the largest concentration of alien soldiers. In 15 seconds, that section of the battlefield would be reduced to molten rock and vaporized metal. The rebels on the ground took cover, knowing that their own vessel's weapons would leave no survivors within a 50-meter radius. Sam rose from his concealed position and drew back his arm with the fluid motion perfected by countless hours of practice. His eyes fixed on the moving target with the intensity of a predator calculating the perfect moment to strike. Every factor had been considered: wind speed and direction at multiple altitudes, the ship's velocity and acceleration, the cooling vent's opening cycle, and the precise trajectory needed to thread a blade through defenses designed to stop battleship weapons. The knife left his hand like a piece of captured lightning, spinning through its impossible arc with mechanical precision. At a distance, where most people could barely see the target, Sam had launched a weapon that would either save his team or disappear uselessly into the sky. The blade rose through the atmosphere, fighting gravity and air resistance while maintaining the exact trajectory needed to intersect with a target moving at 40 meters per second, nearly a kilometer away. As it reached the apex of its flight, the gunship's cooling vents snapped, open exactly as Sam had calculated, exposing the narrow channel that led to the vessel's most vulnerable systems. For a moment that seemed frozen in time, everything balanced on the edge of mathematical probability. The knife, the ship, the vent opening, and the laws of physics all converging on a single point in space where the impossible became inevitable. Then the blade disappeared into the cooling vent with surgical precision, vanishing into the armored beast's mechanical heart like a whisper of death. For 3 heartbeats, the massive gunship continued its deadly spiral above the battlefield, its weapon system still charging for the devastating attack that would end the alien strike team's resistance. The particle beam's energy buildup created an ominous hum that resonated through the mountain stone, promising annihilation to everything within its targeting radius. Then something went wrong deep within the vessel's mechanical heart. Warning lights began flashing across the gunship's hull as internal systems detected critical failures spreading through the power distribution network. The knife had severed a primary coupling that fed energy to the ship's main reactor stabilization system, and without stabilization, the fusion reaction that powered the massive warship began spiraling toward catastrophic failure. Engineering alert, the gunship's automated systems announced through speakers that had been intended to broadcast surrender. Demands: primary power coupling severed, reactor containment failing, all personnel to emergency stations. The pilot's voice carried disbelief as he tried to understand how his invincible warship could be experiencing critical system failures. Damage report, he demanded, his hands flying across control panels that were lighting up with red warning indicators. What hit us? Unknown projectile penetrated cooling vent 7, his engineer replied, consulting damage control displays with growing panic. Appears to be a metallic blade. No energy signature, no explosive warhead. Sir, how is that possible? In the gunship's reactor chamber, the carbon steel blade had done exactly what Sam's great-grandfather had designed it to do: find the weak point in any target and exploit it with devastating precision. The knife had wedged itself between 2 critical power conduits, creating an electrical short that fed back through the ship's entire energy grid. Fusion reactors were marvels of engineering that contained the power of stars within magnetic bottles smaller than cargo containers. But that containment required constant adjustment and precise control to prevent the reaction from either fading into nothing or exploding with the force of a small sun. With its stabilization system failing, the reactor began oscillating between these extremes. Containment field at 60% and falling, the engineer reported, his voice climbing toward panic as he watched readings that should have been impossible. Magnetic bottle integrity compromised. Estimate 4 minutes until catastrophic failure. The gunship's pilot tried to maintain control as his vessel's systems began failing in cascade patterns. Weapons powered down automatically to preserve energy for essential life support. Shield generators flickered and died as power was rerouted to emergency systems. The massive warship that had seemed invincible moments before was rapidly becoming a flying tomb. Down on the battlefield, the alien strike team watched in amazement as the fortress in the sky began shuddering and listing. To one side, Commander. Fash's reptilian eyes widened as he realized that something had accomplished what all their advanced weapons could not. "The ship is damaged," he announced unnecessarily, his voice carrying wonder that bordered on religious awe. "How is that possible?" Sergeant Krell's mandibles clicked frantically as his enhanced vision detected signs of catastrophic system failure aboard the gunship. No weapon was fired. No energy signature detected. What could damage a military vessel of that magnitude? Captain Zora's tactical display showed the gunship's energy readings dropping rapidly toward zero. "Unknown," she admitted, though her professional instincts told her that the impossible was somehow becoming reality. "All units prepare to resume. Assault. Their air support is failing." The rebels on the ground stared up at their flagship in horror as they realized their ultimate weapon was dying in the sky above them. Emergency klaxons wailed from the fortress as engineers tried desperately to understand how their most advanced defenses had been neutralized by an enemy that seemed to be using primitive technology. "Sir," a rebel technician reported to his commander with a voice that shook with disbelief, "our sensor logs show a single projectile entering the ship's cooling system. Metallic composition, simple carbon-steel construction, no guidance system, no propulsion beyond initial kinetic energy." The rebel commander stared at his subordinate as if the man had announced that gravity had stopped working. "You are telling me that someone threw a knife at our gunship and disabled it?" "That appears to be the case, sir," the technician replied, checking his instruments again to make sure he had not misread the data. "Trajectory analysis indicates the projectile was launched from ground level at a range of approximately 900 meters. High in the rocky terrain above the battle, Sam was already moving toward his next objective. The gunship was doomed, but its destruction would take several more minutes, time that could be used to complete the mission, while the rebels were distracted by their flagship's death throes. The mathematical precision required for his throw had been staggering, but Sam's grandfather had trained him to make impossible shots under combat conditions. Wind speed and direction at 6 different altitudes, the target's velocity and acceleration patterns, the exact timing of the cooling vent's opening cycle, all calculated in seconds and executed with the kind of precision that machines envied. Reactor containment at 30%. The gunship's engineer announced, his voice now openly terrified as he watched his instruments record the vessel's approaching doom. "Magnetic bottle collapse imminent. Recommend immediate evacuation." The pilot tried one last desperate maneuver, attempting to bring his dying ship down in a controlled crash that might preserve some of his crew. But the reactor's oscillations were affecting the vessel's artificial gravity and inertial dampeners. What should have been a graceful descent became a tumbling fall toward the mountainside. "All hands abandon ship," the pilot finally broadcast, his voice carrying the defeat of someone who had watched the impossible destroy everything he believed in. "Repeat, all hands abandon ship. Reactor failure imminent." Escape pods began ejecting from the gunship's hull like seeds from a dying flower, their emergency beacons painting streaks of light across the alien sky. Some would reach the ground safely, others would be consumed in the explosion that was now inevitable. The massive warship continued its death spiral, trailing smoke and Sparks as its systems failed one by one. Commander Vash fired his plasma cannon at the falling vessel, more from amazement than tactical necessity. This time, his energy bolt punched through failing shields to scar the armored hull. Draknari, weapons are effective, he announced with wonder, as if he could not believe his own sensors. The alien strike team emerged from cover with renewed confidence, their advanced weapons finally able to engage targets that had seemed invulnerable. Rebel positions that had been untouchable behind energy barriers were now exposed to devastating firepower. The tide of battle had turned completely in the space of heartbeats. Lieutenant Nix's phase rifle found rebel soldiers trying to retreat through their tunnel. System. Phase technology penetrating enemy positions, she reported, her ethereal voice carrying satisfaction as her weapon finally proved effective. Multiple targets eliminated. Corporal Bane's cybernetic targeting systems locked onto fleeing rebels with mechanical precision. Targeting computers operating at full efficiency, he announced. Enemy jamming systems appear to be offline. The rebel fortress was collapsing into chaos as their ultimate weapon became their ultimate disaster. The gunships approaching destruction would take out significant portions of their defensive network, while the loss of their most powerful asset broke the morale of soldiers who had been confident in victory. Where is the human? Commander Vash demanded, scanning the battlefield for any sign of Sam. His primitive weapons should be useless against that ship. How did he accomplish what our advanced technology could not? Captain Zora studied her tactical displays with the fascination of a professional warrior watching the impossible unfold in real time. Unknown, she admitted, but I believe we have severely underestimated human capabilities. High above them, the gunship's reactor finally reached the point of no return. Magnetic containment failed completely, releasing the fury of a star in a space not designed to contain it. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun, vaporizing the massive warship and sending shockwaves that could be felt on the planet's far side. When the light faded and the thunder stopped rolling across the mountains, all that remained of the rebels' ultimate weapon was a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated gas and metal fragments. The fortress that had seemed impregnable was now defenseless, its shields down and its most powerful asset reduced to cosmic dust. In the sudden silence that followed the explosion, one sound carried clearly across the battlefield, the whisper of another blade being drawn from its sheath as Sam prepared for whatever came next. The silence that followed the gunship Orcs' destruction seemed to stretch across the entire planet, as if the universe itself was trying to process what had just occurred. Debris from the massive warship continued raining down like metallic snow, each piece a testament to the impossible precision that had brought down 200 meters of military engineering with a single thrown blade commander. Vash stood motionless among the scattered rocks, his plasma cannon hanging forgotten in his clawed hands, as he stared at the empty sky where the rebel flagship had been moments before. His reptilian brain struggled to reconcile the evidence of his senses with everything he had believed about primitive human technology. Draknari weapons could not accomplish this, he admitted, his voice carrying a reverence that his species reserved for legendary warriors. The human achieved victory with methods we considered obsolete. Sergeant Krell's compound eyes tracked across the battlefield, cataloging the destruction with mechanical precision, while his organic mind tried to understand how simple steel had succeeded where energy weapons had failed. Vorthak analysis indicates impossible probability ratios, he reported, his mandibles clicking with what his species considered profound respect. The rebel fortress had become a graveyard of advanced technology. Shield generators lay silent and cold, their energy barriers extinguished forever. Automated weapon systems had shut down when their control networks lost contact with the destroyed gunship. What had been an impregnable stronghold was now just another ruin waiting for archaeologists to study. Captain Zora emerged from cover with the careful movements of someone who still could not quite believe the battle was over. Her tactical display showed rebel forces in full retreat, their morale broken by the loss of their ultimate weapon. Mission accomplished, she announced, though her voice carried amazement rather than satisfaction. Sir, Lieutenant Nix's ethereal voice carried confusion as she studied the energy readings from the destroyed gunship. Phase rifle sensors detect no evidence of explosive charges or guided weapons. Spectral analysis confirms the projectile was simple carbon steel construction. Corporal Bain's cybernetic enhancements ran probability calculations that his artificial brain rejected as impossible. Ballistic analysis indicates the projectile originated from ground level at a range of 893 meters. He reported, "Trajectory precision exceeds computer-guided weapons by significant margins." The alien soldiers began moving through the rebel positions with the mechanical efficiency of professionals securing a battlefield. But their attention kept returning to the empty sky where their impossible victory had been won. Energy weapons and advanced armor seemed suddenly primitive compared to the devastating simplicity of human ingenuity. Sam appeared among them like a ghost materializing from the mountain stone, his movement so silent that even their enhanced sensors failed to detect his approach until he was already standing beside Captain Zora. His knife harnesses were empty now, each blade having found its intended target with lethal precision. Human. Commander Vash approached with the formal bearing that his species used when addressing superior warriors. His reptilian features struggled to form expressions of respect that had never been designed for interactions with primitive allies. Draknari honor demands explanation. How did you accomplish the impossible? Sam cleaned the last of his retrieved knives with a simple cloth, checking the blade's edge with the same careful attention he had shown before the battle. Same way my grandfather did, he replied without looking up from his work. Same way his grandfather did before him. But the calculations required, Sergeant Krell's translator struggled to render his chittering into words that conveyed proper awe. Wind speed, target velocity, gravitational compensation. No organic mind could process variables of such complexity. Did not need to process them, Sam explained, sliding the clean blade back into its leather sheath. Just needed to feel them. The alien soldiers exchanged glances that transcended species barriers, sharing the universal confusion of sophisticated minds encountering simple wisdom. Their advanced technology could calculate trajectory with mathematical precision, but something in human intuition had achieved results that pure mathematics could not match. Captain Zora studied the human soldier with new understanding, seeing past the primitive equipment to recognize the deeper sophistication that had been hidden beneath appearances. Your weapons generate no energy signatures, she observed. No electronic emissions that would trigger automated defenses. That is the point, Sam confirmed, securing his ballistic rifle across his back with movements that spoke of decades of practice. Sometimes the best technology is no technology at all. The rebels' abandoned fortress told the story of their defeat in broken machinery and silent corridors. Advanced shields lay powerless, their generators destroyed by carefully placed knife throws that had found weak points in systems designed to be invulnerable. Automated weapons stood silent, their targeting computers confused by an enemy that generated no readings. Their sophisticated sensors could interpret. The rebel equipment was more advanced than our intelligence indicated, Lieutenant Nix reported as she examined the captured technology. Their defensive systems exceeded galactic military standards in multiple categories. Which is why they failed, Sam observed, running his thumb along the edge of his great-grandfather's knife one more time before returning it to its sheath. They built their defenses to stop the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. They never considered someone might use the oldest. Commander Vash hefted his plasma cannon with new appreciation for its limitations. Draknari weapons are powerful, he acknowledged, but they announce their presence to every sensor within range. Your blades strike without warning. The alien strike team began their extraction procedures with efficiency born from countless similar operations, but their conversations kept returning to the human soldier, who had redefined their understanding of effective warfare. Advanced technology had its place, but simple weapons in skilled hands could achieve results that energy weapons could not. Match human, Sergeant Krell approached with the careful respect his species showed to proven warriors. Vorthak tactical doctrine must be revised. Will you teach us your throwing techniques? Sam looked up from his equipment check with surprise, that quickly turned to amusement. You want to learn to throw knives? Affirmative, Captain Zora interjected, her command authority carrying new respect for primitive human methods. Our advanced weapons were ineffective against their defenses. Your simple blades succeeded where our technology failed. The request sparked similar interest from the other alien soldiers. Lieutenant Nix wanted to understand how organic intuition could exceed computer-guided precision. Corporal Bain's cybernetic enhancements had recorded every detail of Sam's throws. But his artificial brain could not replicate the human insight that had made them possible. "Takes years to learn properly," Sam warned them, as he demonstrated the basic grip and stance his father had taught him. "Cannot download the skill or program it into targeting computers. Have to develop the feel through practice." But the alien soldiers were eager students, setting aside their energy weapons to practice with simple steel blades that Sam helped them select and balance. Commander Vash's clawed hands required modified grips, while Sergeant Krell's compound eyes tracked trajectories differently than human vision. The training session continued during their return journey, with Sam patiently correcting their form and explaining principles that his grandfather had passed down through 3 generations of human soldiers: wind reading, distance estimation, target prediction, skills that could not be learned from manuals or downloaded from databases. Why do humans preserve such ancient knowledge? Lieutenant Nix asked as she struggled to hit targets that Sam could strike blindfolded. "Your species has access to the same advanced weapons we carry." "Because sometimes the old ways work better," Sam replied, watching her form improve with each attempt. "Energy weapons can be jammed, computers can be hacked, shields can be penetrated, but steel is steel, and physics is physics." Word of the mission's success spread through the galactic military faster than light communication could carry it. The human soldier who had brought down a gunship with a throwing knife became the subject of reports that seemed too incredible to believe. Military analysts studied the recordings with fascination, trying to understand how primitive weapons had defeated advanced defenses. The story grew with each telling, but the core remained unchanged. Sometimes the most sophisticated solution was also the most vulnerable, and sometimes the oldest weapons were still the deadliest. Human soldiers found themselves in sudden demand for joint operations, their simple equipment and ancient techniques proving unexpectedly effective against enemies who had prepared for every threat except the ones that required no technology at all. Back on the transport ship, Sam sat cleaning his knives while alien soldiers practiced throwing techniques that their ancestors had abandoned millennia ago. The galaxy's most advanced warriors were learning from human methods that predated spaceflight, discovering that evolution in warfare sometimes meant going backward to move forward human. Commander Vash approached with a knife balanced awkwardly in his clawed grip. "Draknari request permanent assignment to human-led units. We wish to learn more of your ancient wisdom." Sam looked up from his blade maintenance with a smile that carried 3 generations of military tradition. The galaxy might be full of energy weapons and defensive shields, but there would always be a place for warriors who understood that the deadliest technology was the one that nobody expected, and in the end, that was the most human thing of all.